Hey everyone, my name's Bob Plass and I am from Westfield on weekends, and we have a very special show for you with Don Blanton, who is an artist, sculptor, poet, storyteller, and who is on exhibit, The World of Don Blanton, at the Wow Center, where we are, 105 Elm Street, in the Cultural District in Westfield. And we are here, we have lots of questions. It's a conversation about a well-lived life. And to begin with, I'd ask you, do you think you've lived a well-lived life? Is your life well-lived, Don?
I've had many people ask me the same question since we talked about a well-lived life.
Yeah.
And I said to a few friends, what do you think? Does this sound right like me? And the answer I'm getting from them, not from me, but from them is, Don, you have lived a long, well-lived life. And you continue to live that long-lived, great life.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed it too, more than anything else.
Yeah. You're looking at two, believe it or not,
You don't have to tell them that, but go ahead.
octogenarians, right?
Absolutely.
I think it's octogenarians, right?
Octo. Like
All right, so you started not here in Westfield. You started in Richmond, Indiana.
Yes.
And how did you get, well, let's start with Richmond, Indiana. You go there and then you move after you're there for a very short time, and then you move, I think, right?
No, I actually was born in Kentucky.
Oh.
And at 11 months old, my parents moved from Kentucky to Indiana.
Right.
And I can tell you something really strange. My father had left home when he was 13 years old. He literally ran away. I don't know what the situation was,
right.
but probably 10, 15 years later, when he returned home, they had moved. His family, his sisters and father, they had moved. He didn't know where they were. But when my mom and dad moved from Kentucky to Indiana, a stranger that passed him and said to my mother and father, "My God, you look like a man that lives in Richmond, Indiana." They started to walk away. Then my mom stopped and says, "Well, what's his name?" And the guy didn't know his full name, but he knew his name was Charles something. Well, my father's name was Charles. And my mother said, "Well, his father's Charles. What's the guy look like?" He said, "Well, like I said, looks like him." Found out. So my father and mother went to Richmond with myself and my two brothers.
Right.
And sure enough, it turned out to be his father. He hadn't seen, I think, 13 or 14 years. So I grew up in Richmond, Indiana.
Right.
And then into the military from there.
In the military during the 60s?
Yes.
Yes. So which part of the military, and did you end up going to war, or?
It was the Air Force. In the Air Force.
Right.
And a lot of, I've seen people with the Vietnam cap on, and I have to say, the first thing I think, do I look that old?
Yeah, yes.
And when I ask them, where were you? And they tell me, I said, what years? And they tell me. And I say that I was there in 61. Wow. They said, oh my God, 61? I says, yes, when we were considered advisors, not
The war had not been declared at that point?
It was going on, basically, but had not been declared, period. They were less than honest with the people at home.
Right.
We call it the people in the world, meaning United back here.
Sure. And you stayed with the Air Force through?
Actually, I got out at Westover, at Chicopee.
So that's the connection. That's when you move over here?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And I just decided I'd stay here and make this my home.
From Westover?
From Westover.
Right. Were you married at the time?
Yes.
Yeah. You have a lovely wife and some children? Tell everybody who she is and the woman behind the man, because this woman is behind this wonderful man.
Her name is Judy.
Yeah. And where did you meet?
That was in Springfield.
In Springfield, while you were at Westover?
Yes.
And you stayed at Westover, and then you somehow or other ended up in Hollywood?
California. I wanted to go to school for drama.
Yeah.
And I did. We left. went to, actually, it was another part of California, Bakersfield, and then from there moved to Hollywood and went to school at the Merrick Studio, Lawrence Merrick.
Lawrence Merrick Studio.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And was that you learned how to act, or you learned how to paint, draw?
They did they both actually, but acting, I think acting is being yourself.
Yeah.
I did not find that to be difficult. In fact, the very first time I was on stage, Lawrence Merrick had me on stage, and it was a scene, a psychiatrist and a patient. And the patient was in a movie, a Lenny Bruce movie, about Lenny Bruce. And he was in that movie, he was on stage with me, and that was my first scene in school.
Right.
And I wanted to hear, and as a therapist, as a psychiatrist, I simply listened. The guy's name is Mickey, the other.
Yeah.
And he would talk, and I'd ask him about how he felt, and have you always felt that way? And I'd let him answer.
Right.
And
right.
at the end of the scene, the instructors said to Mickey, who had already been in a movie, Mickey says, you need some work. But Don, you're okay, you did great. Mickey was very upset. He'd already been in movies, and he's going to tell him he needed a lot of work, but I was all set.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, and that was the beginning of it.
Yeah. I noticed Don has a wonderful book out about the world of Don Blanton that you can purchase down here at the Wow Center after you see his work. And interestingly enough, there's Don in Hollywood. And man, I look at this, Don.
Billy D. Williams.
Billy D. Williams, you got it. Yeah, Billy D. Williams. Now, you were going to have a career, so this is a really wonderful headshot.
Thank you.
And so from this, you were going to be in pictures.
Oh, absolutely. Universal Studios. I was put back on the stage, I think 2 months or so after I was there. Lawrence Merrick said, Don, on the stage. I jumped back on the stage, not knowing what it was about. And he says to the other students, approximately 25 students or more, and he whispered in my ear, he says, what do you love to do? And I says, I love art, all forms. And he said, okay, you're the world's greatest artist. He says, and then he said to the students, ask Don questions about art or about anything, and they did. Finally, he stopped him, and I'm still trying to figure out where's he going with this.
Sure.
Finally, he stopped that. He says, anyone tell me, where's he from? And I'm still wondering, what the heck is he doing? Not one hand went up. And he says, do you know why? You don't know where he's from? And the answer was, he's speaking perfect American Standard English. We can understand every word. And he said to the rest of the students, pay attention, make him your friend, and pay attention, because a lot of the students were from southern states, from New York with the Brooklyn accent, with different accents. And you could tell, basically.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he said, by the way, we have someone here to speak to him. A person from Universal Studios, cast director, wanted to come out, speak to me, and invited me out to Universal, and we had a conversation. I did go out, and I have never been told to dress down, because that's what I was told. I was told, he says, and before you come, dress down. And I said to my wife, what's that mean, dress down?
Yeah.
She
No
said,
suit and tie.
and that's right.
Yeah.
And I did dress down and go.
Oh, so your wife and you have to have a discussion about whether you're going to stay in Hollywood and pursue your movie career, because that's where you were headed, basically.
Oh,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
I did not have a name for myself at the point where we would go to Hollywood and Vine, Sunset Boulevard, walk around and look back, and the people following, absolutely following. And what the hell are they following us for?
Yeah,
And I said,
yeah.
think about it, autographs.
Oh, yeah.
And I literally started signing autographs, and I signed my real name. And what really happened that really threw me at one point, has anyone ever seen the movie, or have you ever seen the movie, Imitation of Life?
Oh, of course. Yes,
That-
Lana Turner, I
Yes.
think. Yeah, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Universal Studios sent me for a reading. And they said, it's no big deal, just a reading, and you're playing the part of a man called Big William, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I went, feeling pretty good, but it was not a small deal. There was people there, and I saw the lead woman that played the part of the mother.
Was it Hattie McDaniel? Maybe.
I may
don't-
have been.
Yeah.
May have been. That woman played the part, and her daughter was biracial, and her daughter was ashamed of her. You know the movie.
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, of course, the daughter things turned around, and she couldn't even go to the funeral.
Aha.
But when I walked in for that reading and I saw her there, it threw me, because that was one of my favorite movies.
Yes.
And when I saw her come to hear me read, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she was, other people asking for autograph if I would sign, what's your name, they're saying, and because they saw the producer, different people with me.
Right.
And then I signed, but I'm telling you, when I went on stage, should have been embarrassing, because I was playing the part of a pretty tough guy.
Right.
And a bookie was supposed to come to me to let me know that his boss was upset at me about something. And that would upset me. And when the lines came to me, I drew a blank.
Oh,
And
gosh.
all I could do was just look at the guy. And he upstaged me by saying, "Oh, we knew you'd be upset, but we didn't think you'd be this upset that you wouldn't say anything, And then I realized what I was supposed to say.
Aha, gotcha.
And then I literally said to, if it's Hattie McDaniels, the lead, I said to her in conversation that it was her fault because it threw me by meeting her.
I love it.
She just laughed.
I love it. So you didn't stay in Hollywood.
No, I came home after another meeting at Universal to tell Judy, my wife, that things were looking good and we're going to move forward with everything. And she started to cry. And I thought she was crying because she was happy. She was crying because she says she can't stand Hollywood. She could not stand California, period, and wanted to come home. And I knew she was serious. I decided to bring her home, but I truthfully was going to bring her home, then I was going to go back. But she was pregnant.
Oh, gosh.
And that was our first son.
Gotcha. So you moved out of Hollywood. You came back to the East Coast,
Yes.
to here. Was it here or Springfield?
The Springfield area, yes.
Yeah. And so you then had to support your family.
Absolutely.
And you began working for,
I started off working for Uniroyal in Chicopee.
right?
I moved within walking distance of it, quite frankly.
Right.
Springfield area, but closer. And I had called from California because I said to her, "We're going back. I don't even have a job there."
Yeah.
And
yeah.
she says, "You know they'll hire you back. Just call them." And I figured, nah, they probably wouldn't. But I called, and they said, "Oh God, just come back." And I came back, and at the same time, I got a job right around the corner, which was American Bosch. So
Yeah.
I was working a full shift at Uniroyal, and then I go to the next shift at American Bosch in order to save money to buy a home.
Wild. Now, you then end up somehow or other, we got to fast forward because there's a lot to cover here. As you see, it's a well-lived life, right? You then begin working for...
Command Corporation in Bloomfield, Connecticut.
Right.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
I can tell you how it happened. Of the two jobs, Uniroyal and American Bosch, one close to the other, I had to make a decision. After almost a year of working that many hours,
Sure.
and trying to draw and this, that, and the other, and help take care of my son that was born, I had to make a decision as to which place to quit. So I quit American Bosch, and then shortly after that, in fact, Ted Kennedy came down to Uniroyal to shake hands and to talk to everyone, and they passed out turkeys. And when they did, I said to my wife, "This has never happened before. This must be our goodbye gift." And it was our goodbye gift because they closed.
Oh, gosh.
So American Bikes closed, Uniworld closed, and then, of course, and it was the exact same time we were going to buy a house.
Oh, my
After
gosh.
saving money to get ready for down, blah, blah. And then I ended up that's when I found a job or got a job in Bloomfield, Connecticut, working for Command Corporation.
Now, that's a really terrific story. Could you tell us how you started as a machinist and somehow or other ended up in like administration or something?
Yes.
Tell that story. It's sort of really interesting that your artistic style, your artistic sense really led you there, right?
Yes, and
Yeah,
I tell
and
you,
your invention, you're an inventor.
without realizing it, I really was, at that point, 1982, I wanted to go more into art, which I love. And my wife kept saying, no, you should. She'd open the paper and point to different jobs and openings, and she found one in Connecticut with Bloomfield. So to satisfy her, I said,
Wow.
I'll go down and put in an application. So I went down, put in an application, and as I was putting in the application, I noticed the man interviewing me, he'd ask me a question, then he'd start writing something. And then he talked to me for a while, and he'd write something. And then he gave me the folder, and he said, take this, go down to another building, which is called Comatics. And he explained how to get there, and I said, okay, it's part of Command. But who would not pull over in your car and open up that folder and see? Because I've always been very curious.
Yeah, sure.
So I just
He's
want to
been
see,
writing about you. You're going to check
I
on this.
want to see what the heck is he writing.
Yeah.
And he wrote, very articulate, very nice man, great material for management.
Aha.
So I'm close. I says, good. Well, maybe I will take a job down here, because I did not want to work in anybody's factory. After what happened and everything else, I was sick of factory work.
Sure.
I just felt like that's not me.
Yeah, yeah.
So I saw the man. The man's name was David Cirillo. I had to see him. Was interviewed. I went home. They called me back for another interview with someone else. Finally, they said yes. They wanted to hire me. I thought, management, no problem, you know?
Yes, yeah.
Then they took me to a machine called a grinding machine, an OD grinding machine, oil everywhere, just factory work. So I'm thinking, management, hell, this is not management.
Yeah.
I guess manage that machine.
Yeah, sure.
And I went home the first or second day, and when I got home, I said to my wife, I said, I can't do that. No. I said, I cannot do it. It was running OD bearings. You put a bearing in, wait 30 seconds, take that out, check it, put another bearing in. That would have, I'm telling you, I couldn't take it.
You could have gone crazy on that
So
one. Yeah,
the conversation was, we really need the work. Please don't quit yet. And remember, they were starting a third shift. I was the only person there because they're so far behind on these bearings, they needed another shift to keep it going.
Sure.
There's a manual with the machine, and as I went there, I'm the only person on that new shift, and I picked up the manual, started looking at it, and decided to bring the manual home. And I took the manual home, and I started drawing the inner parts, just sketching it and messing with it and figuring it out. And by doing that, I realized they could run, on that machine, they could run larger parts. And it doesn't take much of a jump to say if they could run larger parts. And it seems to me you could change the wheel size, make some changes, and run more than one at a time at 30 seconds. That's what was a killer.
Yes.
So my next thought was, how could you do that? And I'm thinking you could somehow find something to load up 4, maybe 5, cap it, and then change the size of those wheels, and you could run more than one at a time. So I literally found a screw almost the same size, but a little larger than the pieces had a little hole in it. And I started thinking, by looking at it, I want to get this cut down and polished somehow. And so I figured, okay, I'll go to the machine shop, talk to one of the machinists I knew. And I went to him and I asked him, now, is there any way you can take the screw, it was probably 3-4 inches, take the threads off and polish it nice and finished where I can slide it in the bearings without scratching the inside, the ID. And then tap it on the end where you can put a screw somewhere where they stay on nice and firm. And then I threw cheap psych at him by saying, you probably can't do that. And he said, of course I can. I said, I'll pay you a little something if you can do that. And he said, yes. He said, come back in about an hour and a half. I came back, and sure enough, he had it ready. So I went back. I didn't tell him what it was for. I told him, all I said was an experiment. I went back, and it took me a little while, but I finally made some changes, and checked the parts. They were beautiful. Perfect. So then I smiled because now I think, man, I can go to work one day and and create enough bearings for 2 weeks or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And when I got home, all of a sudden I didn't complain about the oil smell and the whole thing. I said, well, why you seem happy? You don't mind going. I said, there's a good reason why. But I'd always put the machine back the way it was for the first shift coming in.
So they didn't know what you were up to.
Right, so they were still running one at a time.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't even make my probationary period. So it's 3 months go, and you need probationary period in order to be considered a full employee. And then I found out there's a thing called Think Command, where you get a $500 bonus if you can figure out a way to increase production, period. And I waited until the manufacturing supervisor came in. First shift, I knocked on the door. He motioned me to come in. I went in. He says, what's your name? And I showed him my badge, told him my name. He said, what do you have for me? And I explained what I just said.
Right.
He looked at me and he says, what's your name again? And I said, Don. He says, Don, we have engineers here.
Oh.
We have engineers here. They've already tried that. It won't work. And then he said something that I wanted to laugh at him. He said, these are aircraft parts. Like I didn't know
what you were doing, what you were making.
And I said, okay. He said, okay, thank you, and waved me out. So I left. And then I kept thinking, what a dumbass. Forgive me for saying it, but that's what's the truth.
Yeah.
That he should have. So I went back. I don't think much time later, I finally said, I had bearings in my boots, in my locker. I had created so many.
Yeah.
I said, oh, I'm not going to hide them anymore. I'm going to turn them in.
Right.
I got all of those bearings, put them in trays, called the expediters, take them out. They took them out. I don't think a day or so went by, and I made up my production sheets. You make out the production sheets for everything. Everything I made, I put it on production and turned in my production sheets. I was called into his office, and I kind of knew what was up. And by the way, I went back to the machinist, had to make another one.
Oh,
so I got another one ready.
Oh,
when this was finished, I got to pop in the next one.
Sure.
So I was doing 10 to 2, other shifts 2, and I'm doing, so.
They're thinking you're scamming them.
Yeah, right. When I went into his office, I could see my production sheets laid out on his desk. So I stepped into the office, and now it's my turn to be sarcastic and I walked in as if I didn't know what was going on, and I said, his name is David. I said, Mr. Johansson, what's going on? He says, Don, you first came, he says, you really beat first shift, second shift. You really did a great job, and now we know why. I said, beg your pardon? I don't understand what you mean, now we know why. And he says, your production sheets. He says, you've been falsifying your production sheets. I said, I still don't understand. Of course I understood.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm sorry. I still don't understand what you're talking about. He says, look here what you put for that day. You put 800. Here you put 1,000. Here you put... He says, even if you never went home and you worked straight 24 hours, you could never create all that work. He says, so we're going to have to ask for your badge. I took my badge off, laid it down in front of me, and I had the arbors, both of them, in my pockets. I took out both arbors and put them in front of him, and I said, that's my gift to you.
Yeah.
And he said, what are you talking about? And what is that? I says, pick it up. And now I'm going to really treat him the way he treated me.
Oh, good. Absolutely.
And I said, those are called arbors. No, I'm telling you. I said, those are called arbors. He says, for what? I says, you don't understand. I said, the way, I said, what you said about no one could create this much work in this short period of time. I said, no, not running them one at a time. I says, I don't care if you had 10 shifts, you'd never do that. I said, no way. He said, you mean to tell me that you created a way of doing that? I says, yes, and I tell you something else I'll tell you. You need some new engineers. I said, I'm serious. And because he insulted me from the beginning,
Yeah,
I
sure.
said to him,
Sure.
you told me that you have engineers and they tried that and couldn't do it. I said, it took me no time to figure that out. I said, you need to find some decent engineers. I never went to engineering school, not for 1 minute.
Sure.
I says, come on now.
Yeah.
He says, you mean to tell me those are in inspection? I said, let me ask you something. Did anyone go down to inspection to check before you called me in here for this meeting? And I said, you're not answering, so that tells me the answer is no. I says, have you ever taken, I says, you took me for granted, and I said, you assumed no one could do that. I said, the word assume, if you break that down, make an ass of you and an ass of me.
Yeah.
I says, you didn't even go down to check before you called me in here to ask for my badge. I said, you can keep my badge because I really don't want to work for you. And he says, I still don't know if I believe this. I said, well, I tell you what, go find out. Go to inspection. And he said, and this is word for word. He said, Don, can we Don? I said, oh, now you remember.
Yeah,
He
Don.
says, can we, let's walk down there. I said, not for $7.32 an hour. No, that's exactly what I was getting paid, $7.32 an hour. And I says, not for that. I says, my time is worth much more than $7 and change.
Yes.
And all I could think about, and I'll tell you the truth, all I thought about was all the people, men, women, people, period, over this face of this planet who've worked for pennies or less for nothing, whether it was slavery, no matter what it was.
Well, sure.
Whether it was women don't deserve pay that men receive and whatever. And all I could think about, not here. No, not with me. That will not work.
Yeah.
And he says, well, I can promise you if I go down there and things are right, we'll fix this. So I went with him, and he pulled up in inspection, saw all the parts piled up, saw people checking them, and he wanted to know if they're good, and they shook their head. They're fine. So far, they're all fine. And he says, Don, what can we do? I said, what can we do? I said, what we can do is talk. I said, I have 2 kids. I have a wife, I have bills, things to pay. I said, I can tell you what you do. First place, you can double that. It's not much, but you can double it. And then I told him, I really, really shook him up, because I tell you something else is you probably don't think I know. Those bearings, each one, they're called KR4, and K for command. KR4 bearings, each one is $27.50. I says, and there's 100 in the left wing of a plane, there's 100 in the right. I says, when those wings move in, they start to change. I says, and twice a year they change them.
Yeah.
Twice a year. And I said, you have McDonnell Douglas, you have Boeing, and I named all the companies. I said, and let me see if I did my math correctly. Let me see. All the companies multiplied by twice a year, 200 per plane twice a year. And he said, no, you don't need to figure it out. I said, I know, because I know how many millions of dollars that represents. And he says, well, whatever we can do here, we got to fix this. I says, I would hope so. I said, because I can't work for you unless we do. And that's how I put it, because that's how I felt.
Bravo.
So what happened? Did you then become you
yeah.
rose in the
Oh,
ranks?
absolutely. They took me off that machine in no time. and then, I mean, what would you do with someone that did that
Oh,
like
gosh,
that?
yeah, sure.
You know? And
You're smarter than the average bear. We know that. But you know what to do, and you think globally. I mean, you see it in your art. You're a global thinker. You think how to do this, how to do that, et cetera, et cetera. Perfect example.
8 years. I stayed for a total from 1982. I stayed 8 years. I worked 8 years. And to show you just how ridiculous some of the thinking of working by working at Uniroyal, working at American Bosch, doing everything I was doing, I realized there are so many ways that you can continue working a certain job that some people hate, and you can improve it. After 8 years, the worst one ever, they took me to a machine where people would get tired, and when they get tired, whether it was third shift, second shift, whatever, they had a fixture that they put a part in, an expensive part in, and they had to put it in a machine, and they turned the machine on, the jaws of the machine came out, grabbed it, and finished the part. They would put it in ass backwards. So they put the fixture in the wrong way, and they would end up machining the fixture and the part, and they'd have to get a new fixture. And each fixture time that happened, it was almost $1,000. So they took me down to that section, showed me what was going on, and asked me how they could solve it, because they're sick and tired of having new fixtures made. I ever picked up that part, Bob, took one look at it. It was a shaped cylinder. It only took a second to look at it and put it back down. I says, "You're serious? You're serious? You're asking me this?" And he said, "Well, yes, we'd like to do something." I picked it back up. I says, "Well, make it foolproof." In other words, the machine's right here, I could see. Put that in the machine, you only have to put it in a certain, say 2 or 3 inches. I says, make the other end so large it won't fit into the jaws. I said, so when you go back to have
reshape it.
Yes, so when the next time you have to have a fixture made, just simply, and I drew it like with one, it'll fit in.
Yeah.
But you can't put it in backwards. And he shook his head and said, "I'll be damned. I will be damned." I said, and I went home, I finally said, no matter how well I'm getting paid, no matter the bonus, doesn't matter, I'm all done. And I resigned. As I said, I just...
And you were, in your mind, you were saying,
Ooh.
what?
What I really want to do is what I've always loved to do. Come hell or high water, I will paint, I will sculpt, I will create.
Which you had been doing, only it was for someone else, not from you. In essence,
It was for me, but not on the level that I wanted it to do it.
Sure.
That's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's why.
So it's you then are becoming. At that point, you make the decision, I'm going to be an artist.
Yes.
Well, you are an artist. That idea, I used to be an actor, and people would say, well, he's trying to be an actor. You are.
Yeah.
You are. So you are an artist at that point.
Yes.
And you want to work full-time on your art.
Yes.
And
we had a restaurant.
Oh my God.
What do you mean you had a restaurant?
We were subleasing a building, and it was called Don's. On Sumner Avenue, there's a restaurant, Chinese restaurant called the Wong Wok. On that same property, there was another building I was still at command at that time, that we subleased it and created. It's a seasonal. It started off seasonal, where you get hamburgers, hot dogs, soft serve, ice cream, blah, blah. And then I turned it in. I hired family members and other people, turned it into not only seasonal, but lunch. And I expanded it, made it bigger. And when I told command, I'm all done, the restaurant was still up and running.
Sure, Don's is still going.
And my wife said to me, when she finally realized that it was true, I had to resign. She said, and I hate that damn restaurant.
Let's,
That was right by the Big, right?
yeah.
Right? Yes, right across the street from the
It
Big.
became an ice cream shop. I went there when I was a kid.
See? What year was that? Do you remember?
Late 70s, early 80s.
Well, we had it, and we had soft serve ice cream, the whole thing. And when I told her, I said, well, then don't do it. She said, what do you mean don't do it? It'll cost us. I said, don't worry about it. I'll figure it out.
Oh, my gosh.
And we really ended up shutting it down, period. And
You're
my-
going to support yourself then through your art. That was your that was the
without a doubt.
modus operandi here.
What we had, I can tell you, quite frankly, what we had managed to save was a mere $5,000. And I gave it to once. She was so upset when I resigned, and she was very upset to the point of saying, maybe I don't want to be with a starving artist.
Oh, gosh.
And that was the words.
Yeah.
And I understood. I understood that some people just, the word's out, you'll starve as an artist. So
Yeah.
many people have said that.
Yeah.
And I says, well, whatever I have to do, I'm going to do it. Period. I'm not going to turn it. I'm not going to change. And I gave her everything we had. I said, if something goes wrong and we have to sell our house or whatever, don't worry. We don't need an attorney to tell us to split the little bit we have down the middle.
Right.
And we shook hands. Her and I shook hands on the deal. But I said to her, I need 1 year.
Give me 1 year.
No, I know that's right. I said, you give me 1 year to let me get things started. I said, and that's all I ask is 1 year. And we shook hands on the year. And my daughter, who was 14 at the time, in fact, you met her when she came here
I
with
love
my
her.
granddaughter.
Yeah, she's lovely.
My granddaughter said to me, Dad, I'm with you. And I told her, what I want you to do, I says, I have resumes. I said, I could get a job doing this, that, and the other, but I don't have a resume completed for what I love and my passion, which is art. And she says, what do I have to do? I says, help me create that resume. I says, and what we put down there, you may look at it and say, but you've never done it. I said, but I can do it. I said, trust me, I can do it, and this is what you do. And she did. Maybe 15 of those resumes we sent out to nursing homes, to hospitals.
Sure.
Like that. And sure enough, one place responded, Mason Wright. It's on Walnut Street. It's Mason Wright. It's like a nursing home for elderly.
Yeah.
They had just lost their activities director and wanted to interview me about it. And I went down, talked to them, and I explained to them. At that time, there was no such thing as paint and sip, but what I was explaining without realizing was the exact floor mat for paint and sip. I said, I can come in here with the people in here because there's a lot of people in Mason Wright
Right.
that would like to do something rather than just hang out and nothing. And I said, I put a big piece of paper on the wall. They brought in maybe 10 of the clients. And then step by step, I show them how to do a little something, whether it was a bowl of fruit or whatever. And step by step, I'd wait and go check, see, and they had it. And then we'd go ahead to the next. And they loved it. The patients loved it, and they hired me. I came home and I said to my daughter after about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I said, pays nothing. I said, but it's not to pay. I said, that's the foot in the door. I said, from there, we are not going to send out 15. We're going to send out 30, 40, 50
Yeah.
to other places, and we have our model. We're going to use Mason Wright as an example of what we can do. And sure enough, another 3 or 4 hospitals, Holyoke Hospital, East Long Meadow Hospital, Long Meadow sent, can you come in and talk to us? And I did. And then after a while, I started charging more and more. And until the pandemic hit, I was charging, averaging quite a bit per week I mean, yes, I was getting up at 5 in the morning, sometimes creating jewelry for shows like
Sure.
at the Big E and whatever.
sure.
But I'd go to different schools. I ended up in Munson. I forget the name of the school in Munson, but there's a something street school. I ended up almost every at Northampton, at Bridge Street School, Springfield.
So
I've
you're
been-
teaching, you've now become an art instructor.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're using your skill and you're giving it to other people. You're sharing your
Yes,
skill with others
absolutely.
and teaching them.
as a service.
Yeah, well, and then you begin, well, you're painting all the time,
oh,
right?
absolutely.
And you're sculpting all the time,
Yes.
I would assume, right?
Yes.
And then you begin to branch out and you get some shows and people know of you, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of brings us full circle to today.
Without a doubt.
I called Don out of the blue because I saw an article in the newspaper about his well-lived life. And you remember you thought I was selling you insurance or something, or I was scamming you. He says I gotta have you come over and we can talk. But I got off the phone and I thought to myself, oh, I think I'm gonna have to sell this, because I had an idea for Black History Month that we would have you as the wonderful exhibit, to build an exhibit around your work. Well, after 3 minutes at your beautiful home, where he's got 3 studios, incidentally. This man has 3 studios, okay, in his home. And we bonded. And for the last, maybe 7 weeks, I don't know how much time we've spent together, but we've really learned, I've learned so much from you, and you have created one of our most spectacular shows that WOW has ever created. And you've inspired all of us. So we have to talk about your art. So I wonder, where do we start with your art? Where would you like to begin to talk about your art? I'm looking back here at the For the Love of Music. It's so beautiful. But where would you like to start?
Only thing I want to say is the start, very start of everything, artistically started. I had to be 11 or 12 as far as selling work.
Oh, I
and
see.
to know that, because my father used to say, as an artist, you better learn to.
So
prove
you
before.
were painting, or you were, because you had been trained, or you self-taught, or a combination, I would assume, knowing you.
I have an older brother, Paul, 5 years older. I'd have to say there's a lot of intelligence, very genius there.
Yeah.
Because even as a kid, he didn't draw stick figures. If he drew a stick figure, it was to show you how to draw the structure of the body.
Sure.
And
This is
then-
your brother, Paul.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would follow him in school, and by having the same last name, everyone would say, "Oh, you're Paul Blanton's brother. Can you paint and draw like him?" Mm-hmm. And I felt I'd watch him, everything he'd do, and we would work together on certain things. And we used to go up. In fact, I suggested we go uptown, a town probably smaller than Westfield, and ask the merchants if we could put our work, it wasn't framed, just matted work outside.
Yeah.
And at one point, a man came down, and we were charging at that time. I sell something for $2, $3. And as kids, that was great.
Yeah.
And a guy came down, he looked at one of my pieces and says, "How much is that one?"
Yeah.
And it was hanging sideways. It really should have been like this, but I had it sideways to position it later.
Sure.
And I looked at it and I told him $40, because that's what my father earned a week, was about $40.
Oh, I see.
And I wasn't, a little bit facetious, but I was saying $40. And shockingly, the guy reached in his pocket and pulled out a wad of money and peeled off 40 and gave it to me. And my brother says, my middle name's Ray, so he says, "Ray, tell him the truth."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I said, "No, sir, it's only worth maybe 3 or 4. You know what he said?
What?
"No, it's worth much more than any, $3 or $4. He says, "You keep the 40. He said, "By the way, what's the title?" And I looked at it, and I didn't have a title, but I looked at it, and all I could see was trees blowing in the wind. So I said, Silent Storm. He said, oh, I love it. And he took it. I came home, and my father wanted to know, because we told my father and mother, what idiot gave you $40 for that? I'm telling you, that was his words. What idiot gave you $40?
Oh,
He said, where did you steal it from? I said, I
Oh,
didn't
my
steal
gosh.
anything.
Oh, sure,
And
sure.
my older brother said, no, that's what the man gave him was $40.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting thing because art is worth choosing the amount or the fee or what the price of work. Art is priceless in a way, right? Because it comes from your soul, and to how to put money to it or whatever, you know.
That's one of the most difficult things that most artists have problems pricing their work. Art lives. I have a sculpture over here I'm working on. You can look at this. There's life to it. If you can go inside and you can paint or sculpt something that people look at, you as a viewer, you become part of the life that goes with it, because that's never going to leave your mind.
Yeah.
For the love of music will be with you forever.
Yes.
Forever. And price-wise, that's why I had this painting, and this is the original.
Right,
I
right.
had this at Disney in Florida, at Disney World. And a guy from Venezuela came up and he wanted to know, I had a not for sale sign on. He wanted to know what's that mean and how much is it? I said, "No."
NFS, everybody. If you ever see NFS on a thing, it means not for sale.
And the guy says to me, how much? And when I told him not for sale, he said, no, how much? And you know,
sure.
and I said, no, not for sale. He came back with his wife, who almost was demanding. And she said to me, you don't understand, sir, you don't understand. This man will give you whatever you tell him for this, period. And my wife rattled off a very high number, and I said to her, no, not for sale. I said, ma'am, maybe you don't understand what not for sale means. And she said, well, and they walked away. And I'm glad I didn't sell it. I had no intentions of selling it because I can't figure out how much I want to sell it for. I created other themes along the same lines, For the Love of Music 1, 2, and 3,
Right.
or the series.
Right.
I put one in a show for Lynx Incorporated. There's an organization it's a female organization called Lynx. And if you pull Lynx Inc. up, you'll see three women of color started that it had to be in the mid-40s, or I think the mid-40s.
Yes.
And they asked me, actually, I did a show in Boston, and the people setting up, the lady that set up the show, she curated the show in Boston, asked me if I'd donate a small piece of art to raise funds for Lynx, and I agreed. Instead, I gave them a painting of a female playing a bass, and that one painting raised $5,000 for them. So, and they talked to me about what I wanted for it, what could I sell it for, and I told them between 5 and 10. They easily got 5 out of it.
Yeah.
And people were bidding on it.
Sure. It's interesting because I think one of the surprising things about this show is that the pricing for many of the pieces is so accessible and so, I almost think, Don, you're giving it away. And then as an artist, you love the idea of having your art on someone's wall.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, but in like many of these paintings, they have that NFS out there. But you have prints of them. You make prints of them, right?
Right, and they could buy prints.
Sure.
Matter of fact, that's what I did. Hello, we have a newcomer
Yeah,
here.
we have
Hi,
another
how are
person.
you?
Come on in and sit down and listen to our conversation. This is Don Blanton, and we're taping the show for TV. So, yeah. This is live on tape, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Live on tape. So, Don, where do you start when you're well, to answer something that people know, you do these wonderful reproductions of your work. And so if you see something on the wall here, we've got many reproductions, including this wonderful Juneteenth right here.
Yes.
And you, if I'm really, I love the idea that you know how to frame. Your framing, your choices of how to frame an art piece your choices are among the best I've seen for artists.
Thank you.
You know, what do you think about that when you're, you know?
Set it on the table and get rid of it.
Oh, okay, gotcha. We got somebody telling me what to do here. All right, there we go. Yeah.
It's so important, very expensive, first of all, to have your work framed. And that's why I taught myself to frame. I had a friend named Kathy Denny who used to run a place on Sumner Avenue called the Art Shop or something to that effect. I went to Kathy. My kids had awards for attendance and things like that. I went to her and I asked her about having the certificates framed and how much it would cost. And she said, oh, it won't be that much, Don. It's not that bad. It cost me, at that time, $120. I thought it was expensive for certificates. And then she would make a mistake, and she'd always forget to put her open sign out on her shop. And when I drive by and see it, I'd stop and, Kathy, you know, you got to put your open sign up. People think you're closed.
Yeah.
And then I said, do you mind if I watch you frame something? No, come on back. I'm getting ready to frame something now. I went back in the back.
I know what's coming.
And I watched her. And I'm serious. I watched her frame. And she had the machinery for doing it and this, that, and the other. And as I watched her, I realized if I could do it myself. I could see the way the mats, she had cut the mats and left a little white around the edges, measured everything. I saw her with it. And then I never paid anyone to frame anything for me again because I did buy a mat cutter.
Right.
I think it cost about $100. Paid for itself the very first time I used it.
Yeah.
And that was many. I still have that same mat cutter.
The original mat cutter.
I still have that.
But your choices of how to frame and your matting is just exceptional, if I might say, you know?
I try to add some of the colors from the work. I try to get it to look like one.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whether it really, you look at it and you don't just look at the frame, you're looking at everything.
Right. So when folks come down here, if they see something that they love, we could have it reproduced for them and framed.
Absolutely.
And we've done that for several of our folks, right?
Yes.
Now, why don't we take a little break, and we're going to walk over. We've looked at some work of yours that you've painted. Let's talk about sculpture. And we've got a wonderful piece of wood that you're working on right over there. So when we come back, we can talk about that, and then we'll take a tour and talk about some of the individual work that you've got here as well.
Okay, very good.
All righty.
Story how that happened. That was supposed to be I had a piece like the auction box back in the back I was working on, and I had before that I set up a program for the Shriners Hospital.
Yeah.
I go in and work with the kids at Shriners, and it was a matter of giving back. If things started to do well, then I started giving back. Al Zippin, who just passed,
I know.
Al had said, Don, he was a potentate at Shriners. He said, can you come to the children's study home and show the kids what you do? I said, Al,
That's Wilbraham Road, right? Yeah.
Wilbur.
No, Armory Street, or
It's up in that. Yeah, it's on Sherman Street.
No, okay,
Yeah.
I grew up by Allen and Cooley, by the Caldor area.
Okay.
If you're
That's where I
Allen and
grew up.
Cooley.
So further up,
So
Allen Street.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, because they just celebrated.
That's the study. Yeah.
But I did. I went to the children's study home. I said, I'll give you 1 hour at tops because I'm busy. I went down, the kids are all around. I had the piece I was working on, and at the end of it, I said to the kids, any questions, meaning pertaining to what we're talking about. One little girl held up her hand, and I said, yes, dear, what's your name? She says, Sarah, a little peanut of a girl. And I said, what's your question? She says, are you married?
Oh, starting young.
And we all laughed. And I says, yes, dear, and I'm way too old for you. And she turned red. I said, no, you don't need to be embarrassed. It's okay.
Oh, wow.
That was number one. Number two boys, 9 and 12, last name Adams, I'll never forget them either, wanted to help me bring everything to the van. And their principal, Mark Lyon, told them it was okay.
Yep.
Told them it was okay, but they're getting ready to leave, and the 9-year-old reached up, grabbed my pants, like, says, sir, you coming back? And the answer was, it was supposed to be just a short period of time, but when I looked down at him to say no, I couldn't. Because all I could see was myself when I was that age.
Yeah,
And I wanted so badly to go to museums and do things, and some of it I just couldn't do. And when I looked at him to say no, I said, yes. His brother grabbed his arm and snatched him to go back inside, and I heard the older brother say, oh yeah, he's coming back all right.
See, they didn't expect anything because they
Yeah.
never-
Yeah. And you came back.
Oh, dude, I came home.
How many years?
Oh yeah, I came home, and my daughter Colleen, Judy, and everyone says, well, how did your volunteering go this time? And they were kind of kidding about it. And I broke down crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said to the kids and everyone, I said, you guys don't know how fortunate you are.
Yep.
I says, I went to the children's center home. I didn't even know what it was about. I didn't know where those kids came from. Mark told me.
Yep.
He says, Don, I'm not supposed to tell you, but I can see you genuinely care. And I told him, I said, Mark, please tell me about the little girl, Sarah.
Oh.
And he ever told me she'd been abused by some of the male relatives.
Jeez.
And I'm telling you, And then I said, and the Adams boys, he said, they were left on the streets of Boston by themselves to sell themselves to live. And then and Colleen says, oh, Dad, I know you're going back. I said, you damn right I'm going back.
Yeah.
That lasted almost, 30 years?
I think a little over 30.
Over 30 years from that 1 hour.
Yep. Yep.
No.
Wow.
Over 30 years, and I've seen a lot of kids, and I go in, and some of the kids there now, because some of them are still there from the.
I know, I've been there a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great testament to your community work, believe me. I think your community work is, and generosity.
He's a community person.
Community person all the way, yeah. Well, speaking about community, you're doing, well, we're back here, I think, right now, Pete? Hey, everyone. This is the Cradle of Civilization you're working on. It was a piece of, well, you tell the story. Where did this wood come from? And what is it anyway? What kind of wood is this?
You know, I really never even said to the man, what kind of tree are you cutting down?
Was it a neighbor who was cutting down a tree?
Yeah, neighbor right across the street, cutting down a tree, and he said the tree is dying. And I says, well, do me a favor. Don't cut the branch part all the way off. Don't cut the tree up. Leave a big piece of it because I'd like to use that. He says, what, are you going to burn it? I said, no, I don't have a fireplace, period. I said, I'm going to use it to sculpt something out of it. And he left it for me. And then I had some people bring it over and put it, I have a sculpting studio, and they put it in the sculpting studio, sat there for a couple months, and then little by little I started taking the bark off of it. That was the first step, to take all the bark off, and with a tool like this, which is a flat chisel, 3-inch chisel I use for taking the bark off, along with this is a file, big file, that when you can pull this, and it would pull something like bark right off.
Oh, gosh.
I took off all the bark and then started to carved out because this was very heavy.
This was it had a diameter, so this you're
Yeah.
getting rid of wood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because I did that to make it lighter, and I took a lot of wood off the outside interior, but also on the inside. This is called a spoon. I have this tool right here is a spoon,
Right.
where you go in and with your mallet, you can go in and take off big pieces. If I wanted to take off something here, I could scoop off. You can see the chips. You can scoop off big pieces with this.
Sure.
And on the inside, if I reach down in here, I could go in here and do the same thing.
Don, there were not you've hollowed out
Yep, that's what.
sections. So you hollow it out with the mallet
And the spoon. It's almost
Wow.
like that's why they call it a spoon. You're taking out like a big spoon if you were.
Yeah. Well, so you have this piece of wood, and did you in your mind say, I'm going to create the cradle of civilization, which is the title of the piece that you're working on? Is that right? So do you know what it's going to be before it is, or how does that work?
Partially, because one thing about art is some things, just like life in general, as you proceed through life, you've made changes.
Yeah.
It's the same thing basically I knew I wanted to have, that's why I said to him, don't cut the branches too short. When he cut off the branches, I didn't want to cut even with the body of the tree.
Right.
I wanted it to extend where I could come in and put a face here, a face there. I wanted multiple people on here. I put a baby in here because the cradle, and this part will be the cradle. Once I decided to call it that, then I could say, okay, I'll create it this way. And reaching, I have another one, you can't tell the way it is now, where our arm is reaching way up. And I
yes.
extended that arm purposely. When you're reaching for something, you really reach. I want it to look like you've really had to stretch to get that.
Sure.
And
that is a motif in many of your works. I know these large arms that reach out and really embrace a child or embrace the community, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you've got. I noticed that the hands, for instance, are really well worked here. And is the shape of, does the wood determine where you're going with something? I don't know if I'm
in
saying
some
that
cases,
properly.
no, the product stone or whatever. There's a statement by Michelangelo, not Leonardo da Vinci, but I'm sure Michelangelo said, the subject and the person or whatever it is already in there. All you got to do is take away what you don't want. True.
Sure.
You know, and without realizing it, I was made to do this. That's why sometimes it's hard for me to say thank you when people say it's good, because I feel like I'm just the instrument.
Well, it's sort of like you're carving out your own well-lived life. I mean, that you're inventing as you go, and you're being infused with something.
I could tell you folks something that even I did not believe that happens to make sure that I do what I'm supposed to do. I went to New Mexico, Albuquerque, and I was with other people, and there's a place outside of Albuquerque called Old Town. It's a place, have you ever heard of Old Town? Yeah, and there's like little shops and whatever. And when I stepped in with everyone, they kind of went to the left, and I could hear something to the right, like didn't fit in. It's like a saw. And I'm, being the curious type I am, I had to find out who's sawing what here.
Yeah.
And as I approached that building, I stepped up, and there's a person, it was almost like a dream where there's a big rock here, and the guy had a bow saw, big bow saw,
Right.
sawing the rock. Unbelievable. He looks over at me and he says, well, it took you long enough.
Wow.
And my thought was, well, okay, that didn't sound right, but maybe someone was supposed to come there
Sure.
to get something,
Yeah.
and he's telling them, took you long enough. So I said to him, how the hell can you saw a rock? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
He said, oh, no, this is not just a rock. And he says, well, come on in here. And he still didn't explain what it took you long enough was about.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious about that big piece. He said,
Yeah.
this is not just a rock. This is called alabaster. He says, we have alabaster pits here where we sell it. So I'm looking at it thinking, he says, wait a minute, I'll show you what I do with it. And he showed me a little turtle he made with chips with alabaster. But the second he showed me that, I could see what I wanted to do with it. And he said to me, he says, I tell you what, if you go down, take a right when you get out of here, go down a little bit, and you'll see my partner, Ken. He has a table set up, and he's demoing how to use it. And I went down. And as I approached, here's what I mean when some things it's difficult to explain. As I approach, he says, I'm going to need a volunteer. And he says, you'll do, points right to me. And at that time, I know there's no cell phones, no way for that other man to let him know.
Right.
He says, you'll do, come on.
Yeah.
So I stepped up, and he starts telling me, he explained about the tools. He showed the tools. These tools are for wood, but when he showed me the tools for stone. He starts going through all the tools, the pointer and the claws, and he names each one. And then what you have to do with the silicon carbide sandpaper, which is sandpaper that won't come apart when water hits it, how to sand it, how to polish, everything. So I said to him, but when he was finished, now let me make sure I have this correct. And I repeated it. And he looks at me, he says, you've done this. No way no one's going to remember all that.
Yeah.
I said, no, I haven't, sir, but I will. I intend to. That part was strange enough. He gave me a piece of alabaster for helping out.
Yeah.
I came home. My wife wasn't with me. I came home, and she said, now I know. Remember, she's the one that said you're going to be a starving artist.
Yeah, sure.
She said, now I know you've lost it. You go all the way to New Mexico and come back with a rock. And I said, oh, that's not just a rock. I said, I'm telling you. Now, that was on a Friday. Saturday, I got up. I told her and everyone, this rock you're laughing at, I don't have the tools to work with it, so I have to go find the tools.
Oh gosh, I know this. Oh, you told me.
Truth,
Oh, wait till you-
truth,
wait till you-
scary. I said, I got to go find the tools. I didn't know Michael's, some store like that. I left my house and I went to Allen Street, very close to where I live. Gus and Paul's. I passed Gus and Paul's. On the left, I saw a tag sale sign.
Oh, dear. Wow.
Yes. I pulled in, looked around, nothing. Little trinkets and things like that. That's not what I'm looking for. A lady came out of the house and says to me, sir, did you find what you're looking for? And I smiled because this woman, she doesn't know all the tools I'm going to need. Finally, I almost walked away from her. She says, no, did you find what you're looking for? And she was almost, what's wrong with you? Say it.
Yeah.
I said, ma'am, I'm an artist. I paint, I sculpt in wood, I do this and I do that. I'm going to start sculpting in stone, but I don't have the tools. And she says, you don't have tools? I said, no, I don't. She says to me, come with me. Now remember, this is right, close to where So I said, ma'am, what do you mean? She says, in the house. I says, is your husband home? No, I mean, really. Because at that point, I still was trying to build the name and keep respect and honor.
Yeah, sure.
And she said, I don't have a husband, but come with me. And she said it like, what are you here for? So I followed her inside, and I won't kid you, I just stepped back a little bit and let her go ahead, and I followed. You get inside, and she says to me, now we have to go up in the attic.
Oh my gosh.
And that was what I said. So I said, go ahead. And she went ahead, and I was behind her, and as God is my witness, she goes over and starts moving boxes around and pulls out this big leather, like what you put tools in.
Yep.
Sure.
And I knew right away she had the 2.5 pound mallet you use. Then she found some sandpaper, silicone card sandpaper. And I looked at her, and I didn't believe this is happening. I pinched myself. I said, this can't be. The guy gives me the stone. The other guy says to me, it took you long enough. And now I just left the house. I went home and I tried to pay her. I said to her, ma'am, please don't put these in the tag sale. I'll be back. She says, why, where are you going? I said, I gotta go get some more money. I said, I know what all this costs. I says, I don't have enough. She says, money for what? I says, ma'am, money to buy these. She says, why would you pay for what's already yours?
Oh my gosh.
God is my witness. Why would you pay what's already yours? I said to her, ma'am, you don't understand. I don't want to be indebted to someone. I can afford to pay for these. I'll pay for these. She says, no, you're not going to pay for this. They're yours. And I says, I have to ask you, why do you have them? You keep saying they're mine, but why do you have them here? She said, my girlfriends and I took a course at Springfield College. And she said, part of that course was sculpting in stone. She said, we couldn't do that. She said, we couldn't, hard as we tried. She says, there were some guys too, they could not do it.
Yeah.
She said, these are yours and you're going to use them.
You've been preordained.
Now, how could that happen?
Yeah.
Evidence.
Yeah. And that's something about the spirit of the soul. And if anybody looks at your work, it's spirited, it's soulful, and it is so filled with your gift that you've obviously been given. What more do you want to talk about here as we look at? I mean, how has an experience like that led you to, within your work, say what you've just learned? I mean, like, that story is within the cradle of civilization here, isn't it, in some way?
Yes, it is, but I feel that I owe society. We're only here for a short, in the big scheme of things,
Right.
Bob, we're only here for a short period of time.
Yeah, I know.
And that's a fact. We're
Darn
only
it.
here for a short, I'll be 85 soon.
Yeah.
And before you know it, that term is over. I have to put everything that I can. People say to me, how could you do this and that? And then they turn around and create those over there, because I don't stop, and I can't. And I'm not supposed to stop. And yes, I do go through different periods where I feel like sketching and just creating. And it's not all about slavery. Of course, that right there is buried and never forgotten. And yes, that's history. That happened. That's American history. Whether you like it or not, that's what it is. And it's being displayed right there.
Well, just take a look. We've put this up here horizontally so folks can have a look at this. This is that arm, Don, that you were talking about here.
The reach.
The reach, yeah. And when you reach up like that, it's a stretch. It's moving beyond something. I mean, is that what you want to convey with that kind of movement that I see in many of your works?
Yes, because we have to. Sometimes we have to bear witness to certain things. We have to put forth more of an effort, reach harder to make your goals, to be successful at anything, whether it's a friend, a job, no matter what. You have to put more into it.
Right.
That's why the reach is stretched to really do what has to be done.
No, you've used the mask a lot in your work.
Yes.
It's a theme that I see a lot. Would you talk about the masks? Because we have them in all kinds of forms, as folks see in your paintings as well as in your sculpts.
Tell you something about the mask. My mother's favorite poet was Paul Laurence Dunbar. Anybody, if you pull up Paul Laurence Dunbar, you will find out. Now, We Wear the Mask, I decided to write a poem about it. I love poetry and I write it. I started writing a poem, then I started thinking about my mom, how much her favorite poet, Paul Laurence Dunbar. So I pulled up about Paul Laurence Dunbar. Guess what? It was one of his poems. Guess what the title? We Wear the Mask.
Oh, for God's
I
sake.
kid you not, in the first couple lines, same lines I was writing, I couldn't use it because it would have been plagiarism. I'm not kidding you. I've never pulled his name up before.
Yeah.
How in the world? But that,
Yeah, again.
we wear the mask. And then I said, well, I certainly won't use that.
Yeah, your series that is here on the walls. You've done it 3 times. We Wear the Mask. You have
Yes.
series 1, 2, and 3. They're gorgeous, and they talk about the African heritage.
Oh, absolutely. Masks are big time there. Whether it's for fertility,
Yeah.
whether it's to beg for rain, better weather, a lot. Farming, different reasons they wear masks. Part of their culture. And I tell people who make fun of that, I says, think about even Egyptians when they're buried. You know, we'll never understand all that they did. Never. You know, but they didn't just wear the death mask.
There's a life behind, there's a soul, there's a spirit, there's a story
Yes.
behind these masks. And that's what your work entails, really, telling that journey story.
Oh, and I enjoy so much.
Oh, look at this. What do you got here?
This is a shoulder to lean on. The story about this is the very first one I did was a little larger than this, and I was preparing for a show. And Don Blanton's work, new work in stone, it's in Emers. And my daughter asked me, she was quite young, and she didn't understand, she couldn't tell what was going on. And she said to me, what is that? And I said, well, this is an adult hugging a child.
Again, the long arms reaching out.
Caressing the child. And she says, and why? And I says, your grandfather, my dad, you never met him. I said, but never once did he do this. Never once did he give me a hug, and I always thought it was something wrong with me. And I'm creating this because this is the way he should have. And you should hug your children and hug someone. And she says to me, what happened to him? I says, well, he had a heart attack, and my mother had him outside, and I was at the side of the house waiting for the ambulance. And I said, out of 11 kids, 2 older brothers, I heard him say, where's Donald? And when I walked over and looked down at him, he looked up and he says, I won't be back. And he was right, he didn't make it. And I went back to working on it, and she says, well, why don't you write something so people will know when they come to the show? And I says, I like to sculpt and paint this, but I'm not going to write anything. But again, as if it was meant to be, it was almost like somebody touched me on the back and said, I won't be back. I swear, that's what I heard him say. That's when I fell to my knees and began to pray. And I said, Dad, one hug is all I ask. Make it a good one now, you know, one that would last. I would savor his touch until eternity. Please, Dad, just one hug for me. And I was more or less talking to myself and saying that. She heard it and she said, I gotta write this down. She wrote it down and then ended up typing it nice and neat, and we put it when we had the show, she had that right there by it. A lady came in. We hadn't even finished setting up the show. She goes right over to us. She says, "How much is that?" And I said, "Ma'am, we're not finished setting up yet." She said, "No, but how much is it going?" I said, this was, oh man, many, many years ago. And I said, a little bit less than 1,000, somewhere around there. And she said, "Put a red sticker on that, please." And she bought it right away. And again, the last hug.
And you did it again because it's so powerful. You know,
I've maybe 3 times.
You've done it?
I have another man in Springfield that bought one.
oh, it's my favorite. And when you see it in person, there's something that it's like this is hugging me, you know, through you, through your work.
See, but that's what I meant when I said there's a life to the work. When you can reach inside yourself and produce something from just your feeling, your passion, that you care, that hug would have been important. Yeah. So I had to create a hug, last hug.
Oh my gosh. And it's in alabaster.
Yes.
So this came from those tools that
You got it.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know what? We should look at some of your graphite work, and there is a large piece of sculpture
Yes.
over there that
Okay.
we need to talk about, your Primeval Awakening.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to walk across the room, and we'll be right back with you, everyone. Now, we are right over on the other side of the gallery, and here it is. In 2 forms, Primeval Awakening, the painting, and Primeval Awakening, the sculpture. Don, you want to talk about this? Which came first, the painting or the sculpture?
The painting came first.
Aha.
I did the painting. Originally, when I did this painting, I have a younger brother that kind of got himself tied up in knots and in trouble,
Yeah.
and basically stayed in trouble.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, his name's Kenny. I said to Kenneth, I said, "Kenny, I tell you what, this is you." And he kind of laughed. He has a good heart. He
Yeah.
just couldn't stay away from problems and drugs. And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Do you mind if I start calling this bro Kenny?"
Oh.
And he says to me, I said, "I'll make up a poem for it." And he says, "No." I says, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, I want to hear it." I said, "Okay." It all started with no harm in mind. We smoked a little of that just to pass the time. And I says, then a friend of his says, "Hey man, try some of this stuff, it's great." Next thing you know, he could barely think straight. Well, 50 years later, not much to do except smoke a little of that to see him through. He says, "Where'd that come from?" I said, "As I was working on the ropes, I thought about what you've done to your life." I says, "Think about it. You could take those ropes off.
Aha.
Your choice."
So the ropes are there, and yet you have, suddenly it's like floating in space in a starry sky and the universe.
And that's when I started thinking this would be a great sculpt, to sculpt this in alabaster or marble and keep the ground part like this, keep that like that, but just never mind Bruck Kinney, change it to Primeval Awakening as a runaway. A runaway, that's why the shackles.
The shackles are here.
See the shackles?
Yes.
It's broken. And
Oh yes, they're broken.
yeah, that's
Oh,
because
gosh.
oh yeah.
And there's that mask again, of course.
Yep. And the mask is, have you ever noticed kids, like you cover their eyes thinking that you can't see them? Because, no, you can put on a mask if you want to. Guess what? Doesn't matter. You can't mask it. You have to take that mask off and you figure it out and you do what you have to do to make things right.
This is a large piece of alabaster, and how it's shiny and everything. That's part of the you mentioned learning how to make it polished and all of that. It's because you've got the rock, this hard rock here, very similar to the hard rock in this painting, but this is sculpted beautifully and polished. How do you do that?
Same way I talked about wood, only use different tools. I start off simply by thinking of all of us, when our mothers carried us, we were in the fetal position.
That arm.
Possibly and even as adults, to show someone, there are photos and different things where you see someone curled up in that position.
Sure.
Usually it's stressful. What's going on here has been very stressful. Just like I said, it's a runaway. Resting, trying to rest for a while because during the day had to find a place at night to curl up, and hide. I also think of men or women who have been abused and they try to get into a better situation.
Right.
Well, they want to find something where they feel comfortable.
Sure.
Finally.
Right.
You know, and that's what's happening here.
Yeah, which sort of relates to some of the graphics that you've done. Well, let's walk over here to our the graphite works that you've done, which you did basically when you were recovering from surgery. Am I right?
Yes.
You were in bed. We'll move right over first to you had mentioned this before, Buried But Never Forgotten. This is the number 2 one, but this is. You created this while you were ill, am I right?
Absolutely. I was in the bed. I could not get up to go to the studio outside, the large studio. I could, but what good would it do? Wouldn't be able to stand up very long.
Sure.
So I asked Judy if she could give me a big piece of paper, and I put it on, set myself up in the bed, and had it on pillows in front of me, and then I could sketch. And I would sketch, come up with whatever I wanted, sketch it, draw it out, sketch it up, and time went by beautifully. I forgot about the pain and everything else.
Oh my gosh. You are a cancer survivor, am I
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. And we're so happy that you're healthy now and able to get out of bed. But while you were in bed, you still created art. Now, I notice this has many of your themes. You have the sun and the moon, the roots, that rooted sense, trees and roots. You have books down here, you have shackles, and then you have what looks like a bottle. You know, at the first time I saw this, I didn't see, but it is a bottle.
Yes.
Yeah. You wanted to talk, because we're going to see bottles in all of this work here. Where does that come from?
When I first started putting people in bottles, I think the beginning of it,
Is it over here?
Literally, right here. I literally.
Good thing that chain broke.
Good thing that chain broke. Now, there's also a hole here. It's to force you to think. People, certain aspects of life, which we all think is great,
Right.
we don't really know for sure how that's going to work out.
Right.
I'll talk about the examples, what's going on right here today in our lives.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure what's going to happen.
Yeah.
The United States is what, 250 years old or
Right.
so?
Yeah.
Well, that's a short period of time compared to, say, thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
So right now, we don't know. But when I created this, notice there's one here carrying all the weight. There's bricks and rocks on top of them.
Oh my gosh,
That one
yes.
at the bottom.
Yes, person
one
at the
is,
bottom.
right, like all the weight is on your shoulders.
And then you've got the man here reaching up. Again, what I love is that the rounded faces, sort of mask-like, but not. These are human faces now.
Yes. I counted one day, and let's see, there are 11 kids in the family, my father and mother. I started counting. I said, well, maybe so. We lived And when I say a shack, I mean a shack. We didn't have mice, we had rats.
Oh,
And I'm not exaggerating. I can remember my mother with a broom chasing them away from my little sister's food. And all I can say, in a way, we were confined to a very small house, a very small 3 rooms and small rooms, and with all the kids, everything. And I think sometimes this, even when you came to the studio, you saw how I keep expanding it out.
oh
I
yeah.
think
That house is growing and growing and
Oh,
growing.
yeah, and it's okay.
Oh, it's great.
Let
I
it
love
grow.
it. Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do because every single one of us has a child inside us. That child is still in you. I think a lot of people, my brother Kenny, that child in him kind of went
Yeah.
that way. Well, the
Yeah.
child in some of us, no. That child's going to nurture and do what's
And want to get moving and break the chain. And you've got this person coming up out of the bottle, out of this situation. And the family is so important here, right? And it just goes up here. And you've got some roots as well. in
Yes.
this. Yeah, yeah. Now, over here is the buried but not forgotten #1. And again, this is that family. You have a painting on the other side of the wall that corresponds with this
family devotion.
family devotion over there. And here again is that family devotion. And if you spend a moment when you come in and look at these, look at this figure here. He's holding on to the root. Wanting to get out or wanting to grasp onto his roots.
That's why this other one is looking up.
Oh, there's one here. Look at that. Yeah, looking up and saying, maybe we can.
Yeah, maybe we should.
The mountains and everything over here. All right, so let's go back to this first buried but never forgotten, because, folks, I'll stand on this side so you guys over there can see. But what I love about this, well, I thought this is a grave, okay? And a mass grave in a way. And then I looked again and I said, well, maybe it's about slavery. This is a boat. Here is a boat. And then I look and I see something and I think, Underground Railroad, somehow or other, you've managed to put it all there. And again, you've got people underneath holding it up, similar to that bottle over there.
Truth be told, that could go 2 ways. This could be another layer. It could,
I see.
like a basement floor with more bodies under there going all the way back.
Yeah.
But if you come over here
Yeah.
and look
Oh
real
my
close,
gosh.
hiding in here.
Oh, I did. I've never seen this before. Don,
I sneak things in.
there are these people over here.
And they're watching everything. It's
Oh
like
my
us
gosh.
as society. No matter what century we're in, we are all spectators. We're spectators, but we can change life in a general, one way or another. We can mold and change things. And that's what's going on back there.
My God. Now, you've got the shackles,
Yes.
but then you've got the books. And you told me that that is so important to have those books there.
You got it, and I tell you why. I'll use this example. We all know that during slavery times, if a slave wanted to read, what could happen? What could happen? What's happening right now? They're trying to take books out of schools. They're taking books. They're dumbing down our society. Dumb them down. That way you can do whatever you please to do because they're dumber. That's why the books are in here. But guess what? They're buried but never forgotten.
But never
You know,
forgotten.
if I say to you, forget about what you saw here, like in court when the judge says, strike that, forget it, people in jury panel, they're not, once you hear it, once you see it, guess what? We were told we have a piece we had at the Boys and Girls Club, and they wanted us to cover the change.
let's go over here. We're going to walk over in front, and we're going to look at strategizing is the name of this painting.
Strategizing.
Strategizing. Where is the person? Oh, there. Who's strategizing? Is it this man here is strategizing?
And he is pointing to something. Well, actually, they're talking. It's a discussion. Everything, but notice that door is not closed. That door is not closed. In other words, things may look bad. Maybe they're chained. They're in the bottom of the ship. But guess what? What he's pointing to is in here. Can anyone tell me what that is? If you look real close and you come up and you look real close to that later, you'll see it's a key.
I was gonna say key.
A key. There's a key right in the bottom, and he's explaining to this one and them, the key to it is the door's not closed, life goes on, we will figure it out.
Now, I noticed that this is, you've got, again, an African kind of figure here. You've got the universe, which appears in, and the moon and the stars appear in many of your works, and it's going through, would this be Christianity, or is this cross with the hole in it? What might that mean?
Well, remember, the religion, it comes in many forms.
Sure.
But Christianity was forced onto people.
Yeah.
And whether you like it or not, they have to have something to believe in.
Yeah.
And right now, they're believing that's going to work.
Aha.
That's part of the strategy. We have to have, if you don't believe in anything, guess what? From zero equals zero.
Yes, yeah. Your work here is so incredible just from a standpoint of similar objects. I was looking at this. It took me 2 weeks to discover that there was this beautiful chain. Again, shackles or a chain that connects or whatever it is, it's there. And again, this figure that sort of appears on many of your portraits, you'll notice that this figure right here. Well, if we walk over here to We Wear the Masks #2, you've got the history here as well. You'll notice this is a theme, and this is, again, you've got Tutankhamun and these round figures, but they appear in the work, and so your works are talking to one another, Don, aren't they?
And talking to us. And just like it took you a while to go back and you found more,
Yeah.
I encourage people to take the time to really look at it and think about your life. Think about what it means to you, because you're never going to ever forget. I promise you that.
Yeah, yeah. Don, why don't we go over here, because we have, I don't know, I'll ask my producer. Pete, how much more time do we have, do you think?
We can go in a couple hours, so.
Oh, gosh. So we might, for folks out there that have been watching for 2 hours, thank you very much. But we're going to divide this probably into 2 parts after we're done. So
Okay.
folks can take a break. But I wanted to show that you brought it right up into Martin Luther King's time. And again, an incredible, incredible painting. Incredible. Now, over here, behind these are
My doodles.
your doodles. I think this is connected right here to the wall. So
Yes.
we're going to have to stand back over here a bit. But these are
yeah.
your doodles. Your doodles are made with
Pink,
pen and ink?
Pen and ink.
Pen and ink. And one of my favorites is doodles #1. I could spend a great deal of time looking at this one. It's one of my favorites in the show because it has all of the elements that we've been talking about. You'll see them For the Love of Music, and you'll see the piano, and there are butterflies and crosses, and it's referential of your work. It's just so wonderful. They are all just wonderful. Yeah. You want to say something about this one? Is called Nightmare, and it's
This
been
one.
sold, as a matter of fact.
I don't know if you can see this little monster crawling out.
I saw that earlier.
That was a nightmare. I thought that thing was under my bed. I was swinging and hitting. My wife said, "Wake up, you're having a nightmare, wake up." No, I said, "It's under the bed." And then I realized the next morning I had to draw it, and I have it climbing out of the dark. And that's what it looked like.
Oh my gosh. And so then you begin looking at this, and then I see, well, you've got some wonderful fish here. We have an acrylic sculpt over there that references. You've got that bottle again over here. You've got this owl. You've got the butterfly, which appears in a lot of your work. And then, you know, if you come in here, we'll show you some painting that Don did that look as if you were painting Cape Cod. Totally different than these. And they have lighthouses in them. So there's your lighthouse. Oh my gosh, it's filled with these just wonderful, oh my gosh, there's the bottle with the young man reaching up, etc., etc. You tell stories in your work, don't you?
Yes, yes, but guess what?
What?
We all do. That's true. And if we were sitting and we talked for a while, I guarantee you'd have something to say, you know what? That happened to me. Similar, very similar.
Yeah.
Because what does it? We're more alike than disalike.
More alike than
Than
disalike.
disalike.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah. Now, let's just walk over to, well, the final thing that I want to talk about is Juneteenth. Very important to you.
Okay.
And we'll walk over to Juneteenth. And we'll sort of wrap everything up. I've got
Okay.
one last question for you about your life, your well-lived life. Let's go over and take a look, everyone. This is called the auction block, and it is, again, a piece of wood that you've sculpted with many of the images that we've talked about before. Most importantly, as we wind down here, you've got this large poster. Now, this is a recreation of something that you've done for Galveston, Texas. Come over
Yes.
here, Don, and talk about this.
Galveston, Texas, I'm sure if you know your history, you know that in 1685, I'm pretty sure, 1685, the slaves found out, which I think, freedom happened prior to that, but they found out in Galveston later. And it was the 19th of June. That's where the thing came, Juneteenth, last day of the 10th. And I did this, and in remembrance, I called up Galveston, talked to them about it. They wanted this sculpture there, but the original is heavy, it's big. Then I started thinking, hey, create a banner, or like a big banner of it, and that way it's easy. I have talked to them, and they wanted me to come down. And this was before I had surgery. And now I'm figuring maybe within the next few months or so, maybe just go down.
Yeah.
Especially around Juneteenth.
Yeah.
One, to bring them a poster with signatures or have them start signing.
Sure. And you'll notice that there are all these signatures. We've asked anyone that comes to the WOW Center, where this is at 105 Elm Street, to sign. And I noticed, well, we've got Pat's signatures as she's here today. And if you haven't signed it, please sign it. And come down and sign
you
this.
did sign it already?
Yeah.
And your signature, of course, is on there.
Yeah. So all of ours are here. Pete's got to sign, our great producer, Pete Coles, who's created this opportunity for us to talk about the work. Don, as we close, I want to ask you, well, first, a thank you for all you've done and continue to do. You're going to be a part of the WOW community, the Westfield on Weekends community, and you'll always have an opportunity to view Don's work throughout the years, etc. here, and his merchandise. We have wonderful jewelry, very reasonably priced jewelry and other prints, etc. down here at the Wow Center. But Don, if you were going to sum up your well-lived life in 3 words, could you use 3 words to sum up your well-lived life?
Thank you. Thank you, Mom.
Oh,
Thank you, Mom.
thank you, Mom.
Because my mother, I'm telling you, brilliant, brilliant woman. Her biggest regret in life was that she did have an opportunity to finish her education. Because of the depression, she was so hungry she couldn't study nothing. And that's the type of woman. And she, even though it was a lot of us, if I came in with a friend, she'd treat that friend like part of the family. And everyone would say, your mother made us feel like we're part of the whole family. Well, we are a family. And I told you once, I beat up a boy and thought I did the right thing because he called me a bad name. Ooh, guess I got in trouble. Because she said, I think there's more to you. That poor boy, you know he's not right. And then you hit him and you hurt him. She says, you're bigger than that. You're better than that. And I expect more from you than that. And as I grew, I realized she was 100% right.
Yeah. Don, your work is filled with love. And when you speak, your love of life, your love of community, your love of history, and your love and your passion for manifesting yourself through your art and through your relationships with people like us is exceptional. And I encourage everyone, if you have ever an opportunity to see Don's work down here at the Wow Center or wherever it is, rush and look at it time and time again and bring your kids, because I think that's where we start with children. And I got to thank you, my friend. You're the best.
You're welcome.
Listen,
Thank you.
I welcome everyone to the Wow Center. We have lots of programming, and we look forward to seeing you. Thank you, Peter Coles, and to our guests who have come. And we really appreciate your watching, and see you next time.
Thank you.